All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about Chapter 11, and we're going to start off talking about sections 11.1 and 11.2. Probably just get through 11.1, but I'm actually going to mix in a whole bunch of ideas today. So the main focus of today will be to talk about three-dimensional shapes, right? What we like to call solids, okay? Now, obviously, solids have space that they're taking up, and they also have a surface that's surrounding them. So we're going to look at, our main focus in this chapter will be taking a look at the volumes of these solids and what we call the surface area of these solids. Now, before we get into that, we're going to focus on a special type of three-dimensional shape called the polyhedron, or the plural polyhedra. Now, a polyhedron is just a three-dimensional figure whose surfaces are always going to be polygons. Okay, now these surfaces are going to be called the faces of the polyhedron. The intersections of the faces are going to be called segments called edges, and the intersection of the segments or the edges is going to be what we call your vertices. So looking at this picture over here, as you can tell, I've got a surface on the top. I've got this surface coming down the side of the box. I got the bottom of the box. I've got this side of the box. And I've got this back wall of the box, right? And I also have the front of the box, right? Those would be what we call your faces. Now, if you look at where the faces meet, let me erase this. Where the faces meet, guys, this right here, this line right here, that is called an edge. So this polyhedron has all these edges where the different faces meet, okay? You know, back edges, bottom edges, like that, right? Those are the edges. And then lastly, you have your corners where the edges meet. Now, that's a vertex. That corner is a vertex. All these corners are called your vertices. So those are the three major players when it comes to polyhedrons. You've got faces, edges, and you have vertices. All right? Now, the first type of polyhedron that we want to focus on in this class is something called prisms. A prism, ladies and gentlemen, is a polyhedron where two of your faces are going to be parallel and congruent, and we're going to call them bases. All right? So two of the faces are going to be congruent and parallel, and they're going to be called bases. The faces that connect your bases will be called your lateral faces. Okay? Now, a prism is always named by the shape of your base. Now, another important fact is your lateral faces for prisms, lateral faces are always rectangles. Now, over here, I've got two prisms. This first prism, as you can tell, I've got a triangle on the top and a triangle on the bottom that are parallel and congruent. These would be my bases. The two triangles are my bases. Connecting those two triangles, if you look, I've got these rectangles. These rectangles are what we call your lateral faces. Okay, so going off of my definition, a prism has to have two parallel and congruent surfaces or faces called your bases, and then they have to be connected with rectangles called your lateral faces. All right? Now, since my bases are triangles, we call this a triangular prism. Over here, if you take a look, I've got this top polygon and this bottom polygon. Those would be my parallel and congruent bases, right, or faces. Those are your bases. And if you count the sides, aren't those pentagons? So this is a pentagonal prism. And again, notice how all the faces connecting the pentagons are rectangles. Now, the next type of polyhedron that we want to talk about is something called a pyramid. Now, a pyramid, ladies and gentlemen, is different from a prism in the fact that it will only have one base. Now, that base can be, again, any type of polygon. It can be a triangle, it can be a square, a rectangle, hexagon, whatever. But it will only have one base, And then the other faces, your lateral faces, in this case, will all be triangles that all come to a single point at the top opposite the base. So your pyramid has one base, and all the lateral faces will be triangles. Those triangles will come to a single point called a vertex. Now again, just like with prisms, the pyramid is named by the base. So in this pyramid right here, I have a square base, so that we call it a square pyramid. In this pyramid right here, I have a hexagonal base, so this is a hexagonal pyramid. Okay? Now, if you look, these are all the parts of the pyramid that we need to know. You've got this point up here, we said is called the vertex. Now, where the triangle meets the base is called the base edge. The line that connects all the triangles, these are called the lateral edges. Again, the triangles are your lateral face. But then we also have two special words that we're going to have to look at. How tall the pyramid is called the height of the pyramid. But then the height of each triangle, that height of that triangle is kind of slanted since the triangle is slanted. So we call that the slant height of the triangle, or the slant height of the pyramid. Now that's basically it for your polyhedrons that we're going to focus on in this chapter. So let's talk about some shapes that are not polyhedrons, but behave kind of like some other polyhedrons, although they're not. The first shape is something called a cylinder, right? A cylinder, ladies and gentlemen, is similar to the prism. A cylinder is a three-dimensional solid that still has two parallel faces called bases, but in this case, your two bases will be circles. Okay? The lateral face will be this smooth surface that's connecting your two circles. Okay? So those are cylinders. Now, the parts of a cylinder that we're going to be interested in, of course, are things like we care about the radius of my base, and we care about the height of the cylinder, because that's going to affect, both of those will affect both the the surface area and the volume when we get into those. These are, by the way, called right cylinders. Why? Because the circles or the bases are perpendicular to the lateral face. Okay, and then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a look at the last, or no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. The last shape, the second to last shape is a cone. A cone, folks, is a solid that's similar to a pyramid, and that it only has one base. But a cone, ladies and gentlemen, its base will be a circle, and this lateral face will be the smooth surface surrounding it. Now, again, it's going to have a slant height just like the pyramid. It's going to have a vertex just like the pyramid. It's going to have an altitude just like the pyramid. However, the way that we're going to find, say, the surface area is going to be different from the way we find the surface area for a pyramid. And then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we have the sphere. A sphere is what you guys call a ball, right? A sphere, ladies and gentlemen, is just a three-dimensional circle, all right? And that will have a radius that goes from the center of the sphere out to the edge of the sphere, right? And those are basically all the shapes that we're going to deal with in this chapter. We're going to look at spheres. We're going to look at pyramids, cones, cylinders, and prisms. We'll be finding the surface area and the volume of each of those. Now, what is surface area? All surface area is, ladies and gentlemen, it's the sum of all the areas of the faces. Now, for shapes like spheres, that's going to be something special that we're just going to have to take a look. That we'll take a look at at the end of the chapter. So surface area is just the area of your faces, whereas volume is the space that the three-dimensional shape is going to be occupying. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. So take notes on this, and we'll talk more about this in the next class.